Whispers of Liora. Part 1. The Key Beneath the Ivy. The first winds of autumn had begun their quiet song through the whispering trees of VIII. Leaves like old parchment fluttered gently across cobblestone paths, and the last golden light of day kissed the rooftops of the sleeping town. Here, nestled between forest and fog, lived Liora, a cartographer by trade, and a quiet soul by nature. Liora's cottage stood at the very edge of town, where ivy clung like secrets to the stone walls and the scent of lavender and old books filled the air. The home was a maze of maps, some unfinished, some forgotten, others drawn with an obsessiveness that bordered on the arcane. His father had been a mapmaker too, and his father before him, all quietly obsessed with a place they had never found. Liora. That was the name passed down through generations, whispered like a lullaby or a prayer. A city, or a dream, or perhaps just a legend. No one could say. But every map drawn in Liora's family had one thing in common, a faint, uncharted outline tucked in the corner, always shifting, always incomplete. One evening, as the firelight flickered and the scent of pine smoke mingled with ink and parchment, Liora noticed something strange. He had been redrawing an old family map, one of his grandfather's, dated and stained, when the ivy outside his window rustled in a way that felt intentional. It was a calm night, windless. Yet the ivy moved. Drawn by curiosity, Liora stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky bruised with stars, and the ivy shimmered faintly as if kissed by moonlight. As he reached out, his fingers brushing the cool leaves, he saw it, a tiny glint beneath the vines, buried in the stone wall. He pulled the ivy aside and revealed a small, ornate key, lodged into the wall as though the earth had grown around it. It was made of brass, worn but elegant, with strange markings that pulsed faintly in the dark. His pulse quickened. This was no ordinary key. It hummed in his hand, not a sound but a feeling, like a thought trying to surface. He brought it inside, setting it on his desk beside the map. And that's when it happened. The ink on the map began to move. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the lines shifted. The rivers curved differently, the forests grew thinner, and in the bottom right corner, a name began to etch itself into the parchment like invisible hands were guiding the quill. Liora. He leaned in, heart pounding, as the name settled into the page. And then, just below it, a symbol appeared. It looked like a door. Liora didn't sleep that night. He lit candles and pulled books from his shelves, combed through journals, legends, and scribbled notes passed down by his ancestors. All of them spoke of Liora, but never how to find it. Only that it appeared when the seeker was ready. Was he ready? Outside, the ivy rustled once more, softly like an exhale. The wind carried with it the scent of distant rain, petrichor, and something else. Something older. Liora wrapped the key in a velvet cloth and placed it in his satchel. Whatever this was, it had begun. The map was changing, and the key was calling. Tomorrow, he would leave VIII. But tonight, as he drifted into a restless sleep, the name echoed in his mind like a lullaby from a forgotten world. Liora. Whispers of Liora. Part 2. The Path Beneath the Fog. The dawn came hushed and silver. Mist hung low over VIII like a curtain drawn between worlds, and Liora stood at the edge of the town with his satchel slung over his shoulder, the key nestled inside like a secret waiting to be told. The town still slept. Chimneys remained cold, windows shuttered, and only the distant song of a mourning dove marked the passing of night into day. Liora felt like he was stepping between pages in a book, each footfall quiet as breath on parchment. He didn't take the road. Instead, he followed the direction the map had changed, a thin trail drawn in fresh ink, cutting through the woods behind his home, where no path had ever been before. The trees welcomed him with silence. No birds, no wind. Just the soft crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional crack of a distant branch, not threatening, just alive. Hours passed, though he could not say how many. Time felt looser here, as though it bent around the idea of clocks. Eventually, the trail narrowed and dipped downward, swallowed by a low-hanging fog that curled like smoke around the trunks of ancient trees. And then, he saw it. A stone archway, half sunken into the hillside, covered in moss and worn carvings. The air around it shimmered faintly, like heat above a candle. Liora reached into his satchel and pulled out the brass key, now warm in his hand, the markings glowing ever so faintly with a soft, golden light. The archway had no door. But as he stepped closer, the ground beneath him gave a gentle shiver, not in warning but in welcome. He touched the center of the arch with the key, and something opened. Not in the physical sense. There was no creaking or shifting of stone. Instead, the very feeling of the air changed. It deepened, as though he had taken a step inward, into a place not just hidden but forgotten. The fog parted beyond the archway, revealing a narrow stairway descending into the earth. It glowed faintly with bluish moss, lighting each step like a soft breath from the deep. Liora hesitated only once. Then he stepped through. The moment he did, the world behind him vanished. Not violently, more like the slow closing of eyes. The archway faded into a wall of stone, smooth and silent. He was alone, but not afraid. The silence here was not empty, it was waiting. He descended the stairs slowly, listening to the quiet. After what could have been minutes or hours, the passage opened into a vast underground cavern, lit by glowing crystals embedded in the ceiling like stars. A subterranean forest stretched out before him, trees with silvery leaves, pools of still water that reflected dreams rather than images, and in the center, a strange stone pedestal. On the pedestal sat a book. Bound in dark leather, aged but intact. No title, no markings. As he stepped closer, the book opened on its own. The pages flipped slowly until it stopped, on a page bearing only one sentence, written in the same ink as the shifting map. Liora remembers those who seek with silence. He didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But as he touched the page, something stirred in the forest beyond, a faint sound, like the chime of distant bells or the hush of waves against the shore. And just for a moment, he thought he saw something move between the trees. A figure. Watching. Waiting. Whispers of Liora. Part 3. The Watcher Beneath the Leaves. The figure did not move again. Liora stood motionless, heart slowed by awe rather than fear. The underground forest around him held a silence so complete, even his breath felt too loud. The figure had been tall, draped in something that resembled moss and moonlight. Not quite human, not quite shadow. A presence rather than a person. But now it was gone, absorbed into the strange light filtering through crystal ceilings and silver leaves. He turned back to the book, still open on the pedestal. The ink on the page was no longer still. It was moving, slowly forming another line beneath the first, curling in elegant, living strokes. To find the city, one must become the question. Liora didn't understand. But something within him stirred, something deep and quiet and old, as if these words were not meant to be understood but remembered. He brushed his fingertips against the page, and the book closed gently, like it was falling asleep. Then, without a sound, the pedestal sank into the earth. The ground did not quake, it simply accepted the book's departure, as if it had only ever been meant to appear for him, and only for a moment. A soft glow began to pulse beneath his feet. He looked down. The forest floor had changed. Now, a path of gentle light wound its way through the trees, weaving between roots and rocks, inviting him forward. He followed, the air filled with scents he couldn't quite name, something like memory, like quiet rain on forgotten stone. As he walked, he began to notice more things. Small lights floating in the air like fireflies made of glass, trees that breathed softly, stones that whispered faint notes when he passed. The deeper he went, the more the world around him felt alive, not just with nature but with thought. Intention. He passed a pool of water, and its surface rippled without wind. Looking down, Liora expected to see his reflection. But it wasn't there. Instead, the pool showed a version of him. Older, eyes deeper, posture straighter. This version held the same brass key, but his hand was covered in faint lines of gold, like veins filled with light. Before he could take in more, the reflection shifted again. Now it showed the city, or what he thought must be Liora. A sprawl of glass towers grown from stone, vines that shimmered like silk, domes that reflected constellations not of this world. And then, a voice. Soft as sleep. Not heard, but felt. You are not the first to seek. But you may be the first to listen. Liora turned, and this time, the figure stood there clearly. A woman, or something close. Her eyes were silver and her hair moved as if underwater. Her robes were woven of light and leaf, and where her feet touched the ground, moss bloomed instantly. They regarded one another for a long while. No words passed. They weren't needed. She lifted her hand, long fingers wrapped in vines, and touched his chest, right where his heartbeat lived. The world around them stilled even further. And then she said only this: "To continue, you must forget the road behind you." Liora tried to speak, to ask what that meant, but the moment he opened his mouth, the lights around them flared, and the forest folded inward like a closing flower. He felt the earth shift. The sky changed. And when he opened his eyes, he was standing in a place he had never seen. A bridge of glass stretched before him, arching into mist. Beneath it, nothing. Not darkness. Not light. Just silence. The figure was gone. But in his hand, the key pulsed gently, warm against his palm. Liora was no longer just a place he sought. It was a path he had already entered. Whispers of Liora. Part 4. The Bridge Between Dreams. The bridge beneath Elia's feet felt impossibly delicate, a thin arc of glass and moonlight, stretching across a chasm that held no sky, no earth. Just space. Just stillness. With each step, the glass resonated softly underfoot, humming a tone too perfect to be anything but intentional. It wasn't just music. It was memory. Somewhere in the resonance, Liora felt something stir, a recollection he couldn't grasp, like a name on the edge of waking. He paused at the midpoint of the bridge, surrounded by nothingness, yet not alone. Far below, or above, or perhaps in some dimension folded sideways, pinpricks of gold drifted like stars scattered through deep water. They pulsed slowly, in unison, as though responding to the rhythm of his breath. And then the bridge changed. Not with sound or motion, but awareness, as though it had been waiting for him to reach the center before revealing its second self. The air shimmered, and a door appeared. Not a physical door. Not at first. It began as a thought, a shape formed in his mind, then etched itself in light before him, tall, arched, made of obsidian and starlight, standing in the center of the bridge where there had been only air a moment before. Liora approached slowly. The brass key, as if sensing the moment, began to glow more brightly, its warmth now more than comforting. It was anchoring. Real. He lifted it toward the lock that had formed on the surface of the door. The moment the key touched metal, the sound returned, not from the world around him, but from within, bells in the distance, soft chimes, the echo of quiet footsteps across marble floors. A memory not his own, or maybe a dream passed down through blood. The key turned with a soft click. The door opened inward. And behind it, Liora. Or something like it. He stepped through and gasped, not from fear or wonder, but something harder to name. A deep ache. A joy that didn't rise quickly, but grew like dawn across a forgotten field. The city was vast and quiet. Buildings of soft stone and spiraling crystal rose like waves frozen mid-tide. Trees bloomed along the edges of floating walkways. Lanterns hung in the air without chains, pulsing gently with a pale blue flame. Everything shimmered faintly, as if seen through water or memory. There were no people. Yet it did not feel abandoned. It felt paused. Like the city had taken a breath and never exhaled. Liora walked slowly through wide streets where sand whispered across tile mosaics. Statues stood at corners, not of kings or heroes, but of listeners. Each one had its head tilted slightly, as if trying to hear something faint just beyond the veil. Eventually, he came to a circular courtyard. At its center stood a tree made entirely of light. Not glowing, made of it. Branches like strands of gold, leaves that shimmered between translucence and shadow, roots that pulsed faintly beneath glassy earth. And beneath it, another book. Smaller than the first. Resting on a pedestal of stone wrapped in vines, as if grown rather than built. Liora approached, and the book opened without touch. No wind. No command. A single line greeted him. You have entered, but not arrived. And beneath it, etched into the stone itself. To awaken the city, you must offer silence for a night and truth at dawn. He did not know what it meant, not entirely, but he felt it was the beginning of something sacred. The tree of light swayed gently without wind. And far above, or maybe within, the stars of Liora began to pulse again, in quiet rhythm with his breath. Whispers of Liora. Part 5. The Night of Silence. The courtyard of Liora held a stillness unlike any Elia had ever known. It wasn't the silence of absence. No, this was the silence of presence. A kind of living quiet, as if the air itself was listening, holding its breath for something sacred and unseen. The tree of light swayed gently, shedding glimmers that dissolved before reaching the ground. The leaves did not rustle. They shimmered in place, like thoughts half-formed. Elia sat beneath it. The stone beneath him was cool, and the night around him did not darken. The city held its own twilight, a light with no source, no sun, no moon. A hush that came not with shadow, but with surrender. He remembered the words etched into the stone. Offer silence for a night. So he did. He unpacked nothing. He lit no fire. He asked no questions. Instead, he listened. To everything. To the way his breath sounded in this world, slow and careful. To the faint crackle of energy that pulsed through the ground beneath the tree. To the quiet hum that ran through the buildings, a kind of vibration, like distant song. Time melted. He didn't sleep. He didn't need to. Something about the tree, the courtyard, the very city itself, held him in a state between waking and dreaming. Images floated behind his eyes. Not memories, not dreams, but impressions. A child walking alone through mist. A woman writing with light instead of ink. A great library underground, full of books that whispered their contents aloud to those willing to sit still. And always the name. Liora. Not spoken, but felt. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. Eventually, the sky shifted. Not brighter. Not darker. But different. As if the city had exhaled for the first time in centuries. A breeze moved through the courtyard. And with it came sound. Not loud. Not jarring. Just real. Leaves rustling. Water dripping from somewhere unseen. The low tone of wind through hollow stone. The tree pulsed softly. And in the soft dirt beside the pedestal, words began to appear. Etched as if by invisible hands. Elia leaned forward, heart slow and calm. Now speak your truth at dawn. He hesitated. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he did. He looked at the glowing bark of the tree, at the light woven into its branches, at the sleeping city all around him. And he whispered, just once, just barely above breath. I'm afraid that I've forgotten who I truly am. The moment the words left his lips, the tree responded. Not with voice. With light. It surged gently, sending golden ripples up through its limbs and down through its roots. The city answered. Windows blinked open in buildings. Bridges lit like veins through mist. Fountains began to run, their water glowing faintly as it spilled into forgotten basins. Liora stirred. The silence broke. And from the far end of the courtyard, where once stood only stone and shadow, a doorway opened. Not magical. Not grand. Simple. Wooden. Carved with ivy and stars. Waiting. Elia stood. The city was no longer empty. He could feel it. Presence behind walls, footsteps on distant streets, the breath of something ancient rising like dawn. And as he walked toward the door, he felt something inside him begin to return. A softness. A knowing. Not memory exactly, but belonging. He placed his hand on the door. It opened. And what lay beyond was not another room, not a hallway, not even another part of the city. It was the inside of a small cottage. Warm. Familiar. Filled with maps. Whispers of Liora. Part 6. The House That Remembers. The scent was the first thing that caught him. Lavender. Ink. Pine smoke. Elia stood in the doorway of the cottage, the same one he had left behind in VIII, yet everything inside whispered older. The furniture was familiar but softened with age, the books worn, the hearth glowing with a fire that had never stopped burning. He stepped inside. The air felt thick with memory. Not like dust, but like breath. As though the cottage itself had waited for him. On the table near the window lay his grandfather's map, the same one that had first changed, ink bending into the outline of Liora. But now it was complete. The missing lines were filled in with golden script. The name Liora sat not in the corner anymore, but at the very center, ringed with symbols that pulsed softly like a heartbeat. And beside the map, something new. A letter. Unsealed. Yellowed. Written in a hand he hadn't seen in years. His father's. Liora. If you are reading this, then you have found what we could not. Or perhaps it has found you. Liora is not a place on a map. Not exactly. It is a place beneath the map, behind the ink, within the silence. We spent our lives searching with our eyes, our compasses, our feet. You were the first to seek it with your stillness. You've begun to awaken it. But Liora is not just a city. It is a memory we all share, born before words. A truth forgotten on purpose. To go further, you must walk without the key. Let it go. Only then will you know what it has truly unlocked. With love, always. Father. Liora held the letter in his hands for a long time. The fire crackled softly behind him. The wind outside had picked up, and through the window, he could see that the glowing tree still stood in the courtyard beyond the dream door, its branches reaching skyward like questions turned to light. He reached into his satchel and pulled out the brass key. It felt different now. Not colder, but quieter. As if its task had been fulfilled. The markings along its edge no longer glowed, but shimmered faintly, like the last embers of a flame. He looked around the cottage, at the walls he knew, at the maps he'd drawn since childhood, at the dreams folded into every corner, and he understood. He wasn't visiting Liora. He had always been part of it. Slowly, he walked to the fireplace. He held the key over the flames. And he let go. It didn't burn. It didn't fall. It simply vanished, a small glimmer, folding into the fire, as if the hearth itself had taken it home. And at that moment, the world changed again. Not with thunder or light, but with clarity. He blinked, and the walls of the cottage softened into mist. The fireplace flickered into stars. The desk dissolved into stone. And he was no longer inside. He was standing in the heart of Liora. Awake. The city now breathed around him, alive, glowing. Walkways filled with people, or beings who felt like people. Familiar and unfamiliar faces passed by, nodding, smiling, glowing faintly with the same gentle energy that lit the air. And from every corner of the city, one truth echoed, not spoken aloud but known deeply. Liora had never been lost. It had only been waiting. Whispers of Liora. Part 7. The City That Remembers You. Liora wandered slowly through Liora's waking streets. The city had transformed, not into something new, but into what it had always been beneath the stillness. The glass bridges shimmered with travelers now, their footsteps soft and echoless. Lanterns floated higher in the sky, forming constellations that subtly shifted to reflect the thoughts of those below. No one rushed. No one spoke loudly. The people of Liora moved as if time was a companion, not a master. And as he passed them, many smiled at him, not with recognition of the face, but of the path. He had walked the silence. Given truth at dawn. Let go of the key. That mattered here. Liora crossed a narrow stream that flowed through the city like a silver vein. Its waters didn't reflect the sky, they reflected possibility. He saw, for a moment, his hands covered in light again, golden lines running through his skin just as in the dream pool from before. But this time, he felt no distance from the image. He knew it was coming. At the center of Liora stood a tower. Not the tallest, but the oldest. It was made of stone and glass and something more ancient than either, memory pressed into shape. Its surface shimmered gently, layered with carvings too deep for language. Each time Liora looked, they shifted, sometimes into symbols, sometimes into images, sometimes into moments that flickered just at the edge of sense. This was the Hall of Return. He didn't know how he knew the name. He just did. Two figures stood at its entrance. Not guards. Not sentries. They looked more like keepers, dressed in flowing robes of woven mist, eyes clear, kind, ancient. They bowed to him. "You may enter," one said, their voice low as a drumbeat in water. "The city remembers you." Liora stepped past them into the tower. Inside, silence. Not emptiness, the same sacred silence he'd known under the Tree of Light, but deeper now. More complete. This was the core of Liora, where silence wasn't the absence of sound, but the fullness of meaning. Here, truth could exist without needing to be spoken. He descended a spiral staircase made of light. And at the bottom, a room. Circular. Open. Lit by a sphere of slow-turning stars at its center. Around it, on curved shelves, were books. Thousands. Each one bound in different colors and textures. No titles. No names. Just quiet. He reached for one. The moment his fingers touched the spine, the book opened, not in his hands, but in his mind. He didn't read it. He remembered it. A life, not his own, but somehow part of him. A girl on a cliffside who sang the tides into changing. A boy who could hear the thoughts of trees. A wanderer who carried light in their veins and planted stars in their footsteps. Each story settled in his chest like pieces of something larger, waiting to form a picture. And then he heard the voice again. You are not the first to return, Liora. But you are the first to return awake. He turned. The figure was there again, the woman wrapped in silver and shadow, the one who had watched him from the forest, who had guided him without words. She stepped closer now, and her face was clearer. Not old. Not young. Time did not cling to her. You are a keeper, Liora said, though he didn't know how he knew it. She nodded once. We do not keep the stories. We keep the doors. Liora is the library of memory, of all who have ever walked between silence and truth. He swallowed softly. And me. You are one of us, she said. You always have been. But you had to forget to find your way back. She reached out and touched his forehead gently, and when she did, a warmth flowed into him, not burning but unfolding. And behind his eyes, a flood of returning began. He remembered the first time he had seen the map as a child. The first time the key had whispered to him in a dream. The voice that had called him from the riverbank. He remembered the library beneath his grandfather's house. The one that had always been locked, the one he had never dared open. And he remembered something even deeper. That Liora had called him before he was born. Because some stories begin long before they are written. Whispers of Liora. Part 8. The Archive of Breath. The woman's touch left Liora reeling. Not with pain, not even with shock, but with a stillness so total it felt like he had become part of the city's breath. He saw himself from the outside, the child tracing stars on his bedroom ceiling, the boy whispering secrets to stones, the man standing on the edge of forgetting, key in hand, map folded in coat. All of it led here. To Liora. To the library beneath silence. The woman stepped back. You are not here to stay, she said softly, folding her hands. Not yet. But you must choose how you will carry what you found. Liora looked around the chamber. The books still pulsed softly on the shelves. Some, he knew now, were his. Not written, lived. He turned toward the sphere of stars in the center of the room. It turned slowly, patiently, casting constellations on the walls and floor, revealing shifting names in languages that didn't use sound. Names made of emotion, of memory, of feeling recognized. What is this? He asked, though some part of him already knew. The archive of breath, she said. It holds not what was written, but what was felt. Every moment given full presence, each one catalogued in starlight. Liora stepped closer. A single breath escaped him, and the archive responded. The stars shifted. Rearranged. A new pattern blinked into place, a constellation in the shape of a winding road, with a small flickering flame at its center. One of the stars pulsed gold. That one, she said gently, is yours. It was recorded the first time you let go of fear and walked into the unknown. He stared, stunned. Do you mean, the bridge? I mean every step before the bridge, she replied. Liora watches long before the map appears. He turned to her. What do I do now? She smiled. You return. Liora's chest tightened, not from dread, but from something gentler. The ache of leaving something sacred. The weight of carrying it back. You mean, leave Liora? You will leave the shape of it. But it will not leave you. You will walk in the world again, and with you, you will carry the gate. She stepped forward and placed something in his hand. A stone. Small. Smooth. Marked with the same glowing sigil as the tree of light. not engraved but alive. This will not open doors, she said. It will remind you that they are everywhere. Liora closed his fingers around it. And if I forget again? You will. That is the nature of walking the waking world. But now you know what forgetting really means. And you know the path back. She placed her fingers gently over his heart. And you are no longer walking alone. The tower began to hum around him. Soft at first, like wind through leaves, then rising in gentle tones, like a choir you only hear in dreams. The books lifted from their shelves. The stars folded inward. And Liora felt the world begin to turn. Light poured from the floor, from the walls, from the sigils carved in memory. The woman raised her hands. The chamber was dissolving, not into nothing, but into story. He didn't fall. He drifted. Through memory. Through mist. Through breath. And then, wind. Trees. Water lapping against a riverbank. He opened his eyes. He was back. Liora stood once more at the edge of Weathermere, just as dawn broke through the clouds. The sky looked ordinary. But he no longer needed it to look magical. He reached into his coat pocket. The stone was still there. Warm. Humming faintly. He smiled, and for the first time, he understood the smile of those in Liora, quiet, complete, not because everything made sense, but because everything belonged. And far in the back of his mind, like a whisper in a familiar room. Return when you're ready. Bring others who are listening. Whispers of Liora. Part 9, The Quiet Flame. Weeks passed. Or maybe months. Liora no longer measured time the same way. He returned to his home in Weathermere, the quiet cottage with the crooked shutters and the vines curling along the eaves. The world had not changed. But he had. The river still whispered at night. The breeze still carried the scent of wet stone and pine. But now, in between those familiar sounds, Liora sometimes heard something else, a rhythm beneath the rhythm. A language without words. He did not speak of Liora. Not at first. The silence of the city had followed him home, and he wore it like a cloak. But people noticed. The way he listened. The way he paused before answering. The way he looked at things, as if seeing more than one layer at a time. And slowly, others began to ask. Not directly. Just in passing. Do you ever feel like there's something waiting? Have you ever heard a place calling, but not with sound? Do you believe places can remember us? He didn't answer with words. Instead, he invited them to walk. Down quiet roads. Along misty paths. Across bridges with no names. He taught them to listen. To wait. To breathe in silence and trust that it too was alive. And one by one, they began to change. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But slowly, like stone warmed by morning sun. He gave each of them a small stone, smooth and silent, with no instruction. Just a nod. Just a glance that said, you'll know. He never told them where the stones came from. But when the time was right, always on a night with no moon, they would find themselves waking or dreaming, or somewhere between, standing before a city they couldn't name but somehow knew. And the path would open. And Liora would remember them. Years later, long after Liora's hair had turned silver and his steps had slowed, a child knocked on his door. She held a stone in her palm. It glowed faintly. I saw a tree made of stars, she whispered. It said to find you. Liora smiled. He stepped aside and opened the door. Not just to his home, but to the beginning of her story. And in the fireplace behind him, the flames flickered once more. Not orange, not red, but gold. The color of a city that never leaves you. The color of silence that sings. The color of remembering. Whispers of Liora. The end, and the beginning.